Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, if you love Navy SEALs, this is going to be an amazing conversation. My brother Jeff is the Swiss Army knife of positivity. He's an author, he's a Navy SEAL, he's a podcast host, he's a trainer, the Swiss Army knife of positivity. This is going to be an amazing conversation. And if you stay till the end, we're going to give you some cheat codes that you can start using today to start getting into the headspace of a Navy SEAL to actually start getting better at, especially entrepreneurship. So, Jeff, my brother, welcome to the show.
Richard, thank you for having me on. It's my honor. I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Brother, I'm so grateful, and I want to give a big shout out. If it wasn't for Aaron, we wouldn't be together. Point of Impact podcast. So if you love podcasts, check out Aaron at Point of Impact Podcast. And also thank you, Monster Energy, for giving me the energy to stay up and continue doing these amazing shows. So, Jeff, first question right out the gate. What is your definition of resiliency?
It's a great question. I have come to I have become more aware of what resiliency means from being able to define it. Living it, it just became, it was just like breathing air. I didn't really know any different. I didn't understand that what I was experiencing, what I was doing was in essence a form of resiliency. And I think one of the best things for me, how do I define resiliency? It's the simple ability to stay the course through all the obstacles that are thrown at you, to maintain your mission, your goals, your objectives, to be undeterred in what you're trying to accomplish. Because no matter what, there is always something coming at you that is unplanned, unscripted, things that just don't favor the outcome that you're looking for, that you've got to deal with. Like I do a lot of prep work. I do a lot of planning. For me, planning is life. And I believe that planning allows me to adapt to the circumstances. Like I'm more agile. I'm more capable of just kind of flowing with things because I have a good plan to start with. I'm not just kind of winging it. And my ability to adapt to that situation, I believe, is another way of expressing resiliency.
Okay, and I love that, and we're going to be talking about the teams, but you're so much more than the teams. So, but if I don't talk about it, people are going to be mad at me. So we're going to talk about it. So
of course,
give us a quick down and dirty about where you come from, where did you grow up, and how did you even decide to join the Navy SEAL?
So my origin story is fairly bland, I would say. Boring, maybe. I grew up in Central Texas. I played aquatic sports, so swimming and water polo, which I loved very, very much. I never truly appreciated how much I am grateful for that experience. It clearly was evident during my naval career. And during my high school years, I floundered. I feel like the majority of guys in my era. There was the career counselor's office that you would go to and do all these assessments and tests, and eventually there would be some sort of listing of potential occupations or fields that you should pursue. And every one of mine was like outdoor related. And it's not that I had anything against those professions. I admire them, but I wasn't really enamored with them. It didn't fuel me. And so I started looking, and you got to put it in context. I'm a little bit on the older side. And so when I went to high school, there was no internet. There was no Wikipedia or ChatGPT or anything like that to kind of help do research. You basically had to go to a library and try to find books. And at the time, man, there was such a small sampling of books on special operations in general, not just the SEAL teams, just in general. It wasn't very prolific at that point. And most of the time I found like just little snippets, just small blurbs or paragraphs, maybe a chapter here and there, but nothing that was very definitive. And that was disappointing. Ultimately, I decided that I would go and talk to the recruiters and kind of get a better feel for it. And I'd done enough research that I kind of knew what I wanted to do, but I had no idea how the Navy worked. That was completely foreign to me. When I went in to talk to the recruiters, he did his best to talk me out of the SEAL teams. Fortunately for me, I was underage. So, you know, I really didn't have any, I mean, it was not like I was called to task because I was underage and my parents had no idea what I was doing. So eventually I kind of wore this recruiter down because he was telling me that I couldn't go spec war and I couldn't go to the A school that I wanted. And I'm like, nope, this is what I want. I'm not joining if I don't get this. Figure out a way to do this. And eventually I think he just probably gave up, was tired of seeing me come into his office bitching about the same thing over and over and over again. And he finally was like, okay, all right, we got it. So I enlisted in the delayed entry program.
Yep.
Because again, I was still underage. And I wrote out, I don't know how long it was. It might have been like maybe 4 to 6 months, somewhere in that neighborhood. And the thing that really sold me on the SEAL teams was at that time I was a senior and I was swimming and playing water polo. And my head coach for the entire district decided that I had the aptitude to join the modern pentathlon team. And so if you don't know what the modern pentathlon is, 5 events, running, swimming, obviously, horseback riding, which was very interesting to me, shooting, marksmanship shooting, bullseye type shooting, and fencing. So I had no idea what the modern pentathlon was. He took me to the headquarters, which was located there in Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. And I got the chance to meet all the coaches. Now, these are coaches that some of them were Olympians. Others were just professional coaches. I mean, it was a pretty cool situation and operation. And my coach had kind of found out that I was interested in the SEAL teams, though he really didn't know what they were. And the head coach of the pentathlon team wanted to take me in to meet these 2 gentlemen. They worked in a building. They worked in the building that they were housed, their HQ was, and they had this single room with 2 facing desks. This was the most military room you could ever imagine. Very generic cinder block walls, steel desks facing each other. There's these 2 guys that were sitting at the desk. And I walk in, it's a small room. These guys stand up and the coach introduces me to them. And these guys are just like, they're like specimens, just like Adonis. And I'm like, I looked at them and the coach was telling me, these are active duty SEALs that are TDY to the pentathlon team to train. And I met these guys and it was like, all right, I want to be like those guys. That's what I want. I want that. And that's kind of what motivated me to keep going back to the recruiter and get him to eventually get me what I wanted, which I did. I got it. I went and competed at nationals for the pentathlon. I did pretty good. And I think it was like 2 weeks after that, we were having dinner at the house with my family. I have a younger sister and then my mom and dad, and sitting at the dinner table. And I just kind of casually mentioned, so I joined the Navy and I'll be leaving for boot camp in about 2 weeks. And it was just like the most eerily quiet moment at the table. And my dad said something and my sister was like, you did what? And my mom just was just like speechless. It took a while for her to finally come to grips with what had happened. Because again, I was underage, so they didn't realize that I could use the delayed entry program as a vehicle to get what I wanted, which is what I did that. I wasn't trying to hold it from my parents. It's just that's what I wanted, and I wanted it then and there. So that's kind of my origin story. I went to boot camp, went to A school, went to BUD/S. I went to my first duty station, and very fortunate. In my case, I consider it to be very fortunate that my SEAL team was tasked to conduct some combat operations. So as a new guy, I was thrust into a combat scenario very early on that forged me into, you know, the SEAL that I would become. So kind of an interesting start. My naval career was everything I could expect. Looking back, you know, I wish I'd done more. I wish I had done more. I wish I'd gone and volunteered for things that other guys did. And I wish I'd done, I wish I had taken different paths than the path that I ended up taking.
All right. So, you know, let's talk about, take us back to Hell Week, because I've had some of your contemporaries on, Rich DeVinny, John McCaskill. And you know, I always ask them, and I think it's amazing. I consider it amazing that, you know, a lot of men rang that bell, and
It's true. It's very true.
So take us back to Hell Week, and like when I talked to John, I said, John, you know, how did you make it through? And he says, they'd either have to kill me or there's no way I'm going to quit. So they're going to either have to kill me or I'm going to have to drop. I'm not going to quit. So take us back into the mentality of what it takes to make it through Hell Week.
So I think it deserves going back a little bit further and actually looking at what it takes to successfully complete BUDS, because that's how I looked at everything. And for me, I took everything one step at a time, like one evolution at a time. Like I had in my head, I knew that I was going to graduate. I was confident that I was going to graduate. There was very few things in my life that I was ever as confident as I was then. Were there some down, you know, some negative moments? Absolutely. Dive physics killed me. I was the scariest time the second scariest time I had at BUDS was when I failed dive physics and I had to remediate. And had I not passed the remediation, I would have been kicked out. So I had some bad times too. But my point that I make is that I had decided that this is what I was going to do. And part of the reason that I joined the Navy was because I wanted to prove to myself that I had what it took to be the best. And I'm not taking slights at anybody at any of the other special operations, but at the time, the SEAL teams, in my opinion, were the pinnacle. They were the top of the rung. And so that's what I wanted. I wanted to challenge myself. I felt like I was up to the task, but it's always a question mark. It's like, okay, am I? So let's see. So BUDS was the ultimate test. And rather than look at, I have to navigate 3 phases, approximately 6 months, depending on your, if you roll back or if you started late, it's about 6 months. And so in my head, I said, okay, for 6 months, I have one job, and that is to complete one evolution at a time. That's it. So rather than look at the entire 6 months, I looked at the very next evolution that was ahead of me. Just that first little step. And, you know, I would take a step back, and I think distance is always very helpful for me. So like I could take a step back and look and think, okay, well, Hell Week is around the corner, or pool comp is around the corner, or land nav is around the corner. So I could always step back, but I lived in that moment. I lived in those exact moments of time with a clear, like everything I did, I gave my absolute best. Some people will say, well, you can never truly give 100% because then you'll just keel over and die. I think it's a metaphor for us to use. I gave my all the time. Every evolution that I had an opportunity to do something, I gave my all. And I had so many great mentors in my own BUDS class that we created our own little petri dish of challenges, like whether it was the 4-mile time run, the O course, or the swim. We were always jockeying to see who could outperform the other guy or the other group. There was about 5 of us in that group. And so that's all I thought about. I thought about that. I want to do my very best. What does it take for me to do my best? And the thing that I really walked away with was I was a gifted athlete, no doubt, but I wasn't perfect. I had plenty of shortcomings. I wasn't good at everything. And what I had to learn very quickly was I have to sustain what I'm good at, but I also have to try to work at what I suck at. And I have to try to build up those deficiencies, because once you get to the SEAL teams, that's a major thing. The weak link. You never want to be the weak link. You always want to be that shoulder to stand on. And so part of Buds was forcing you to accept that there are things that you are not good at, that you will have to lean on your teammates for, or that you will have to figure out, like that's the true pit of despair, where you're looking into that pit and you're questioning, is this the right thing for me? Because I saw plenty of guys do that. I was very fortunate that, like, I might have circled that pit of despair, but I never really looked deep into it, because I knew that this was what I wanted. This is what I was meant to do. And I know that sounds very, very cliche, but in truth, that's what I believed then, and that's what I still believe to this day. Now, did I learn while I was at Buds? Oh yeah, there was so much opportunity for failure. But because I had, strong running background, strong swimming background, and I was athletic enough to do well on the O course, it allowed me to take those failures in stride. And while those failures could have been traumatic for other people, they were just opportunities of growth for me. Like, okay, I need to get better. Like, this thing is kicking my ass. What do I need to do to get better at it? And here's one thing that I will say that I didn't do well. I didn't ask for help. I would try to figure out how to do well on my own. The one time that I got help, but it wasn't because I asked for it, was one of my diving instructors who took a liking to me, wanted me to succeed, and he worked with me to help me better understand dive physics. And as a result, I passed that test. So I owe him big time for that. And it's just one of those things that I had to figure out how to study things that just were way over my head. Dive physics was just, it's now looking back at it, I understand it a lot more, but at that time, oh my God, it killed me.
I'm a sports guy. I kind of hearken everything back to sports. I had Mr. Lee Steinberg on, the #1 sports agent in history.
Oh, wow.
And he said that he could look at somebody like Jeff George and say, he ain't going to make it. And he would look at somebody like Peyton Manning and say, he's going to make it. He's got the it factor. Mm-hmm. Now, I know, like, when I talked to Rich, that he said there was a lot of guys that would show up that had the Adonis body. They had all the physical attributes.
Yeah.
Didn't make it. So,
absolutely.
So there's a certain it factor, I think, because even like I told John McCaskill, like I was joking with him. I'm like, bro, you look more like my accountant than you do David Goggins. He's like, yeah, most guys that go through the teams, you don't think that they're actually SEALs if you see them outside of the teams. So is there a certain it factor that is inside of each and every Navy SEAL?
I would say yes. When I circled back to be a Buds instructor, it gave me a very interesting perspective. Going through as a Buds student, you don't really have the best awareness of what's happening around you. But as an instructor, you get a chance to see things. And so I could look, I wasn't 100%, obviously, but I could look at the trainees and I could assess them. And I would, because I worked in third phase, they had first phase and second phase to get through. A lot of times I would go to the various evolutions that were milestones in each of those phases, and I would observe and kind of watch them. I would even participate in Hell Week as an instructor, as an assistant. Basically you would go and help because it's a 24-hour thing for the phase, so they don't mind having people come and help them, because I wanted to kind of get to know the class and get to know the students a little bit better. And as I did that, I discovered that there were certain traits that you could just see in people and recognize, okay, this is definitely, like you were saying, an it factor. It's not necessarily a physical trait, though I will say it has everything to do with enduring, not just endurance, like you have good metabolic conditioning and shit like that, but you have the capacity, the mental capacity to endure and actually go that extra distance. So a lot of times I would look and see who was the last guy out of the chow hall by choice. Not because they were the last, but because they were helping, or they were working, or they were doing something for their class or for their boat crew. That was one of the best ways for me to kind of gauge people, was the chow hall experience. Because you go in there in your boat crew and you kind of go through, so there's a pecking order, basically of how they go through. But how they leave is also really interesting. And watching that, seeing, who are the last guys to leave, and paying attention to, are they the last guys to leave because they chose to be the last guys, or because of the circumstances that they're in? That was really helpful. Other things that were helpful was, like, when you know somebody struggles, when you know that this evolution sucks no matter what, how do they approach it? How are they? Because there's a difference between the false bravado and confidence, right? And we used to have the rappel tower evolution that we would do. And I'm going to be honest, I hated heights. I was scared to death of heights, and having to do the rappel stuff, the off the wall and through the hellhole, that was really hard for me. So I could appreciate the difficulty that students had as they confronted that fear, because there's a lot of unknowns that the students are facing. Granted, at this point in naval history, with so much information out there now, people have a better understanding. But back in the day, it was somewhat shrouded in mystery of sorts. So hitting the rappel tower could be a great way of testing someone's mettle, testing their ability to confront something they're afraid of, yet still do it. And I'll tell you what, man, that scared the piss out of me, because you're up there basically hanging on a rope, waiting for somebody to do something for you. You don't have any control. You have to let loose control and literally rely on the guy down below you to help you get down. And it was interesting to watch students who, you could kind of tell who the students were that were very much afraid of heights, or afraid of what they were about to do. And you could also tell those that had a degree of comfort, is not the right word, but just composure. They were composed. And so even though they were scared, they were still in control of their own self, which was another huge factor in determining who was going to succeed through BUDS. So those are two kind of like a little different perspectives, but those were how I, as a BUDS instructor, would evaluate. And part of that reason is like, well, okay, is this trainee who is potentially struggling, is this somebody that I want to invest in, that I believe would make a good asset to the community? And if they were, I would invest in them. And if not, I would let the system do what the system does so great.
All right, so take us to the day you graduate. I hate to say that word, but
That's fine.
because like when I talked to Rich and John, something they said is, and I never thought about it, that once you graduated and got to Trident and all that stuff, there was kind of an emotional lull that they got into, because now you're like, okay, now I'm graduated. Now what? Now I got to get to the teams. So take us to that, and to the mindset of, what was it like? Okay, well, now I go to the teams. Now this is a whole different animal.
So my experience was different because, again, I'm a little bit older than those gentlemen. So when you graduated buds back in my day, you went to jump school and then you reported to your team. And once you were at your team, you waited for what's called, or back then what was called STT. Today it's called SQT. And back in the day, each of the coasts had responsibilities for training the freshly minted bud students in what's called STT, SEAL Tactical Training. And it was about 6 months. And so you would check into your team, you would wait for the next STT class to start, and then you would go through 6 months of very, very tradecraft oriented. Like buds is good. Buds is more, you don't really get the tradecraft at buds. Once you get to the STT or SQT, that's when the tradecraft really hits you. And so after STT, you go through a 6-month probation period where you have what's called a Trident Review Board. And your basically you have this process. Back then was called PQS, Personal Qualification Standards. And it was a book of what it, like, itemized list of what it meant to be qualified to earn the Trident. And you would have to go through and get, is like, it reminded me of the Boy Scouts, your Boy Scout manual, and you would go and get your merit badge and you have to get all these things checked off. It very much reminded me of that, because that's exactly what would happen. You'd go to ComET and learn how to use these radios. You'd go to medical and learn how to administer an IV. You'd go to ordnance and you'd learn about all these things. And then at the very end, you had your board where you would go in, and all of the senior SEALs, mostly chiefs, would be sitting there, and you would have like about an hour-long board where you would just get hammered by questions and demonstrations and all the stuff. And there's a bunch of records that follows you into this, right? So they got all your records. And at the end of the board, they will make a recommendation to the CEO as to whether or not you've earned your Trident. And I remember I got one question wrong on my board. I was so mad. And I can remember this question to this day. Like, that's like, God only knows how many years ago it was, a long time ago. But the question that stumped me was, for fast rope operations at night, how many chem lights and what position on the fast rope are they positioned? And my response, I said 2, but the correct answer is 3. There's one at the anchor, there's one at the bitter end, and there's one 6 feet from the bitter end. So you have a 6-foot marker to know that you're close to the bitter end if the rope is fully extended. Most of the time the rope lays on the ground, but every now and then the helo will deal with some updraft and the rope will go to full extension. So you have an opportunity to see the 6-foot mark and the bitter end. So if you're going to hit the ground or you're going to hit air. So that was my board. I didn't know that I was awarded, I had earned my Trident. The next day at quarters, the CO came out, and I was, everybody was in their camis, and I got called up. And I was one of 2 guys at my team. There was only one other guy at my team that was a new guy, but he had been there for a year, but he had to wait for STT. So the classes are not, they only happen like once a year kind of thing. So he happened to miss last year's class. So anyhow, we both got our Tridents at the same time, and I never forget this. He got his Trident, he went back to his platoon, and they just dragged him away into the oblivion. And because basically what will happen, at least back for me, both of us, the CO pins the Trident onto your chest, then he pounds it into your chest, Then he has you do an about face, and he acknowledges that you are now a SEAL to the community. And then generally each of the other platoons would come in and they would pound the trident into your chest as an acknowledgement that you are welcome into the community. And in my case, that didn't happen. So I was freaked out. I was like, what the hell? Because, this is the tradition. This is what you hear, the lore, if you will. So for me, mine didn't happen until our next training trip. We go out on our next training trip, which was a really cool training trip. And we're at the end of it, and we're getting ready to leave to come back to the team area. And I'm like a good little new guy. I got my wheel book out, and I'm writing all the notes down for all the things we have to do to get ready to leave. It's a big movement, right? And the very last thing was recognize, my call sign back then was Speedy, recognize Speedy's trident. And I literally wrote down and then all of a sudden I realized, oh, it's on. And so I stood up, my trident, I got a fresh trident put in my chest, and then all my platoon mates came in, and that and a bunch of other things. But when I got back to the team area, there was just this sense of pride and accomplishment and euphoria. I walked into the team area not as a new guy anymore. I walked into the team area as a team guy. And it's the greatest feeling that I can describe. That first time walking back through the quarterdeck as a SEAL. Even though I technically was, it wasn't until my platoon had acknowledged me and welcomed me into the brotherhood that I truly was.
One thing I love about, special ops, that you guys work as a team. That's why they call it the teams, because you guys work as teams. Mm-hmm. And whether it's business, whether it's personal, whether it's military, you're only strong as your weakest link.
100%.
And I think that a lot of times especially when you become an entrepreneur, you think singular instead of building out your team. So I don't talk about the war stuff. There's other shows for that. I'm not talking about that stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's fine.
But you went everywhere, did everything, did all the things. So what was it like hanging up the uniform for the last time? Because I know one of my friends, Sergeant Nick, said on the show years ago, once you get out of the military doesn't give a shit about you. Your phone stops ringing. You don't have the camaraderie. A lot of us didn't finish our whole 20, so we're not getting a paycheck. Yeah. And a lot of us don't have a mission once we get out. So what was your experience like? And were you as prepared as you thought you should have been?
No, not at all. I left the Navy because at the time my girlfriend, who became my wife, was pregnant. And I had seen so many team guys try to do the best they could at being a family. And it's not a job that you can do that. You can't, in my opinion, you can't be 100% present for both. You've got to pick one. You can be 100% present for one of them and maybe 50% present for the other. So it just depends on what you want. For me, I could not in good conscience be 50% present for my teammates. That's never I saw that too. I saw that in some guys, and I never wanted to be that. So we made a decision that I wanted, if I was going to leave the teams, it was going to be because I wanted to start a family. And I was at that point in my career where it was a tough call because, I'm now moving into leadership positions. We're now getting all jocked up to do all sorts of crazy stuff. But I really wanted to be successful as a father and as a husband. That's the reason why I left. But the transition was anything but just like predictable or planned. I had a hard time transitioning. I really, really did. When the GWAT kicked off, I knew, like, I was in Paulding, Arizona, teaching a rifle class the morning that the towers fell. And about 3 or 4 months later, I was in lockdown in Kirkland Air Force Base because we had just invaded Afghanistan. And my package to go back into the Navy had just been over. It had just been, so many people were trying to get back in that for whatever reason, my package just didn't make it to the right people. And I took that as a sign that I wasn't wanted. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up going and doing, I basically did the exact same job. I just did it for different organizations. And so I didn't really transition away from the SEAL teams, like in a clear, to me, I was still doing that job. I just was doing it with a lot less logistics and a lot less support. So it took it for me, I did not fully, quote, separate until probably about 08, 09, when I finally stopped going overseas. And it wasn't until then that I finally accepted or acknowledged that, okay, now I have to fully transition into the civilian life. Because at that point, I was still deploying overseas. I was still going overseas. I mean, I was spending a boatload of time overseas. So it wasn't until then that I actually felt like I pushed back from the table, hung up my spurs, whatever you want to call it. And then I tried to focus, okay, now what's my next mission? And it was like you were saying, the hard part that I feel that many veterans struggle with is their next mission. What is their purpose? For me, my purpose, I always believed in my purpose. My purpose was to work with my teammates to find, fix, and finish our country's enemies. I mean, that was my purpose. That was what I believed in. Once I no longer was doing that, it's like, well, what am I doing now? What is my purpose?
Yeah.
And it's hard to let go of that. I mean, I freely admit I don't ever really fully let go of it. And there's that one single strand that still attaches to me. But the hard part that I had was letting it go. I didn't want to let it go. And I would keep trying to find things to do that gave me that same purpose. So reluctantly, I eventually fell into, not reluctantly, I shouldn't say it like that. It was a little bit fortuitous, actually, that I fell into the training role. And, I kind of split time working overseas and then training back here domestically. And it helped me to find purpose. And it gave me a new mission, because I can't ever find a replacement for that older mission. There's just never going to be that.
Yeah.
So I had to come to grips with, I have to have a new mission. And so training, educating became my new mission. And I immersed myself in it like I did anything else, and I rose to the top within the community and I did that for a really, really long time. And I'm very, very grateful, because many of the people that I work with, they went off to fight in the GWAT. They went off to become, police officers or sheriff's deputies or law enforcement officers in the federal government. And I'm extremely grateful that I had the opportunity to influence them in that sense. And probably one of the things that helped me to come to grips with it, it took a while, was the first student that survived a gunfight that came to me and recounted that something that he had learned in class or in training helped him to win his fight. And it was a humbling experience that at that point it was like, I'm now fully invested, because up until that point, I still was like, I was not all the way in. But that first call that I took, at that point, I realized, okay, this is my new purpose. This is my new mission. And I was fully committed to it at that point. So my best advice to transitioning veterans is you have to acknowledge that you need a new mission. I don't know what that mission is going to be. I mean, some guys will go back to school, get their MBAs, and find themselves in corporate America doing amazing things. Others will find themselves doing kind of what I did, which was, they work as a they work as a contractor, and that does a great thing for that does a lot of things to fulfill them. But I think those that struggle to find that fulfillment or find that mission, those are the ones that I want to reach out to and really connect with the most, because, man, I was there. I struggled. I had a hard time when I eventually got divorced, which was the irony behind everything. I was in a very, very dark place, very, very dark. And I think the only thing that helped me, there were two things that helped me. One was returning to my roots. I'd lost my way, in a sense. And what I mean by that is, to do that job, you have to have a very intentional mindset. To be at that elite level, you have to have an intentional mindset about everything that you do. Somehow, when I left the Navy, for whatever dumbass reason, I didn't think I needed to be intentional with the stuff that I was doing. And a good friend of mine helped me kind of claw my way out of that hole, because one of the other things was that when I say get back to my roots, I need to get back to my roots entirely. And I'm talking about the physicality. So like getting back to training, getting back to not just shooting, but combatives, not just combatives, but the lifting, the strength and conditioning programming, not just that, but also putting work into my recovery, and how, because it's so purposeful in the Navy, at least within Special Warfare, NSW. It's very purposeful about all of that, right? And when I left and I didn't have somebody to kind of do that for me, it was all, now it's on me. I let it lapse. I let it kind of go to the wayside. And I see so many other veterans doing the same thing. And that's what I mean by you've got to find a mission, but you've got to get back to your roots, right? We wake up every morning to go and do something, usually physical, PT of some sort.
Yeah.
Right. And we do that because it puts us in the right mindset. It puts us, those that gravitate towards that type of job, whether within the military, there is a certain calling of that. Maybe not everybody, right? But a good majority of people really appreciate that. I mean, in the beginning, you hate it. You're like, oh, this sucks. It's so cold. It's so hot. I'm tired. I'm sore, blah, 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 blah. But overall, and you think back to it, you're like, this is amazing. Yeah. This is outstanding, because this is what my body and brain and mind need. I need this physicality. And, luckily for me, again, I had a very good upbringing on the athletic side, and I fell back into that. And finding my purpose and getting back to my roots is what helped me to climb out of that pit that I was in, that hole, right? And I never want to go back there. And
all right, so now, what did you take from the teams that has helped you in entrepreneurship? Because I know from my parts of my military, I've taken so much from that and used it in my entrepreneurial journey. So what have you taken from the teams that you're using today in your entrepreneurship?
So when I left the Navy and I started training in the shooting industry, there really wasn't a lot of special operations guys at the time. There was maybe 2 or 3. Now you can't throw a stone without hitting one. But back then there weren't a lot. And when you ask me what did I bring from my community to the shooting world, the training world, if you will, what I brought was the mindset on performance standards. That's what we built our business around, performance standards. We were the only company, like when I got out there, nobody was doing that. It was just like everybody was given a juice box. You came to class, you got a certificate, even if you sucked. And that's not how I was forged. I was forged with an understanding that performance is what matters. That it's not feelings, it's performance. And so we came into this industry. I did what I didn't do anything special. I just did what I knew how to do, which is we held people accountable. You came to a training class, we're holding you accountable. You're not just going to get a certificate, you're going to earn that certificate. You're going to earn it because you're going to put in the hard work. And when you do put in that hard work, you're going to build yourself up. You're going to build up your confidence. You're going to build up your capabilities. You're going to build up your ability to be an asset to your department, your team, your company, whatever the case might be. So I brought performance standards from my community, and it's the thing that stands, that's what people know us for. That's my reputation, or our reputation, the company's reputation, is that we're going to drive you hard. We're going to demand from you performance. And there's a very good chance that you're going to fail. And if you do, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. We need to fail in order for us to grow.
But you also brought a lot of planning, because I know you guys have planning for planning for planning for planning.
I laugh about that because it's second nature to me. I do. I think where I really also brought a unique perspective is our curriculum. So like our actual living curriculum, my last duty station was as a BUDS instructor, and one of my duties was I was responsible for all of the curriculum for my phase, for third phase. That included also performance standards, performance records. And when I left the Navy and I started training, and I looked around and I saw what was happening out there, I was like, wow, there's just people are just flying by the seat of their pants. For us, a training course was the byproduct of curriculum development. People just create a class without really doing any of the back end work. We started with the back end work, and the byproduct or the finished product was the training class. So we put a lot of work in our curriculum. And I think we're one of the few organizations that actually does as much work in defining what the curriculum is. Everything from terminal objectives, enabling objectives, the actual schedule itself, the actual metrics that we observe, the measures that we take. All of that is part of our curriculum. It's all part of a bigger plan. It's not just one little snippet. It's all part of a bigger plan. And that came from the Navy, because that's how we did it. Everything was documented. Everything had to be documented. Your curriculum had to be documented so that the next guy could teach it without, hey, what are we doing here? So my curriculum is the same way. When we onboard a new instructor, they get a package that allows them to go from tooth to tail on how to teach this curriculum, should I not, or any of the other senior instructors, be on hand.
So now, because I find, and I've talked to, now you're like my 1600th interview.
Wow.
Something stupid. But, I talk to a lot of veterans, and they're like, when I get out, I don't feel, I don't fit in the customary employee, because,
100%.
We get there early, we leave late. We don't sit and hang out by the water cooler for 15 minutes talking about the Dallas Cowboys. Or, we're so used to, we go home when the work is done. So why do you think veterans make great entrepreneurs?
I feel like veterans make great workers in general, but they do really good at entrepreneurship, partly because it is a very self-started business. You have to be self-guided as an entrepreneur. It's on you. There's nobody else. There's no other department that's going to do all this other stuff. It's all on you. And I think that is that is, like we live by what we call commander's intent.
Yeah.
The commander gives us his intentions and boom, we go off and we take care of business. And I think the more that a veteran can, and here's the thing that really is also a struggle, is that trying to decode what a commander's intent is. What does the commander's intent when you walk into a new place of employment? What does that look like? Well, it's probably not going to be labeled commander's intent. It's going to probably be something else that you're going to have to sort, you're going to have to source, or you're going to have to ask, or you're going to have to research to figure out, okay, what is the commander's intent? And that's kind of what I meant by we have to kind of translate, I guess is a better way to say it. Translate how the civilian workforce thinks and acts compared to the military workforce and how they think and act. So I think the struggle that a lot of veterans have is trying to understand the difference in lingo. But I also feel like they need to lean into those things that you just described. They're early. They work until the work is done. They're driven autonomously. They don't need to be micromanaged. They might need a little oversight, but the left and right bumpers to keep them going in the right direction. But generally, they're fire and forget. You give them a task with the left and right limits and the outcome that you're looking for, and just let them go and do it. And I think that's something that is underappreciated in the workforce because it's incredibly valuable. And one of the things that I truly believe the veteran brings to the table is a bottom-up leadership model. Most businesses work with a top-down leadership model. And, within the special operations community, we're a bottom-up leadership model, right? That's why the commander's intent is so important, because it guides me on what I need to do in absence of orders, absence of instructions. I know what to do. I know what is expected of me. And, I feel like that's something that veterans should really lean into and help their organization to understand that in today's competitive world, it's not always the first one that's to market with something that's the winner. It's the companies that are the most agile, that are the most adaptable, that can actually pivot on a dime. What I've seen, it's like agility in a large organization is unheard of. Yeah. But to be defensible in your industry, you have to be agile. And that's why I believe bottom-up leadership is so valuable. And I encourage veterans, obviously you have to have some tact about how you go about it, but I encourage veterans to use that experience that they've gained to help their organization to be more successful, more competitive in their unique individual sector, whatever that might be. Because that's huge. It's such an underestimated, undervalued component to what a veteran brings to the table.
Yeah, and I also think, we know what a 9 line is.
Yeah.
We know, like you said earlier, all right, 05 PT, yeah. 07 chow, 09 we're on the range, 1300 we're having chow again. We know that, okay, we're going to plan out our day.
Yeah.
And I think the civilian sector is just, a lot of it is just, I'm going to go to work, start work at 9 o'clock. I'm going to leave at 5 o'clock. But you're not really working. You're not really hitting the goals in between that 9 to 5. You know what I mean?
It's true. And that can be a very big struggle for veterans. I know that I struggled with that at times. Because things don't happen as fast as I'm accustomed to. Things don't happen as quickly as I'm accustomed to. There's a lot of initiative-based action on my part. I don't need or won't, sometimes I don't want that management aspect. I want to just go. I want to go and do what I need to do. And that means that I want to get this task done by the end of the day. I don't want to wait for some sort of dependency from another department or another organization to complete my task. I hate that. It just drives me crazy. I'm like, I could do that. Let me just do that. No, we got to wait. We got to let them do it. I'm like, well, but I could do it, and I could be done with this, and then we can move on to the next task. So it's frustrating for sure. I have to rein myself in. That's one thing that I have to definitely work better at, which is, and here's the other thing. I mean, sometimes the culture is the hard nut to crack, because sometimes the culture just doesn't want that. Doesn't want to be. They're happy where they're at. They're content with that type of status quo. And for us, everything is in a constant state of flux. Hurry up and wait, because things are changing all the time.
Yeah.
And I feel like, that's another thing that you should lean into. The veteran community has the capacity to just like go with the flow of sorts, but at the same time, get stuff done when it needs to get done.
Organized chaos.
There you go, man. 100%.
So now if somebody's getting out of, this is a teaching podcast also.
Yeah.
If somebody's getting out of the military in the next 12 months, what would be your top 3 pieces of advice for them to succeed on the outside?
Number 1, find your mission. Number 2, stay true to your roots. Number 3, be the example for your organization. Be that example. Like, do everything to the best of your ability. The way that I say that is, set the example that you want others to follow.
I love that. And I had one sergeant major. He would always walk around saying he was the standard, but he literally was the standard. I mean, he was, tall, and he had the gig lines and everything. He was the standard. So I love that you talk about, set the standard. Yeah. So what's going on in Jeff's world? I know you got the podcast going on. Yes. You got training going on. What's going on in Jeff's world?
Well, the podcast we had to shelf when we had to move the studio to a different city. Unfortunately, our headquarters, our parent company, they moved their headquarters to a new city. And so it was something that we just had to park until we could figure out a better solution. I miss doing the podcast. I love doing the podcast. I enjoy the seat that you're in right now. I enjoy this seat, but I really enjoyed that seat. I found it to be very, very challenging for me. Very challenging. And I like that. So I would like to say, go check out the podcast and, whatnot, but we've kind of, like I said, put it in the back burner for now. Really, the training is also the main thing that has always been a staple for us, but I've been shifting more into the consulting world. And a lot of what we're talking about right now is some of the things that I have been targeting within the consulting world, particularly as it relates to veterans, helping veterans to kind of find a cleaner pathway, a better pathway. Many veterans struggle. Again, you're accustomed to this organized chaos, and when that organized chaos is pulled out from underneath you, it's a little disheartening, and it's difficult to accommodate. It's difficult to try to adjust to that. So, my new mission right now is to help, assist, guide those veterans to get to where they belong, to where they feel like they belong.
So then how do we find you? How do we support you? How do we get into your ecosystem?
Love it. The best way is just to go to our website. At the moment, we'll have more stuff catered for the veterans down the road. But for now, tridentconcepts.com. That's where you can find everything about us. All our social media, all our videos, YouTubes, our blogs, our training calendar, all of that stuff is all located off of our website, which is tridentconcepts.com.
I love it. And I'm following you everywhere. So I love everything that you're putting out.
Thank you very much.
I'm so grateful that we finally got a chance to hang out. And hopefully we can build a generational relationship from this point forward.
I would love that. I would. It's great. And I think that's super important. So please, whatever I can do, just hit me up.
I love it. So guys, make sure you check out the website, check out everything he's doing, follow him on social media. You're gonna get a lot more than you think you're going to get. And guys, like, as I end this show every day, every week, I always end it with a Joel Osteen quote that he says that every morning you wake up, you can either be a victim or a victor. If you listen to this show, you're no longer victims of your past. You're victors of your present and future. So, guys, thank you for always showing up, giving the support for the last 13 years, 1,600 episodes. Thank you guys for always showing up and showing out. And remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is up. I love you guys. Have a great week. Oh, Aaron, we got to give a big shout out to Aaron before we go. Check out Point of Impact Podcast if you love amazing podcasts. And also Monster Energy. Monster, thank you for keeping me energized all day long. Jeff, my brother, have an amazing week and take care.
Thank you, sir. You do the same.